I watched $342 million disappear in 3 hours and 14 minutes. Not my money, my work. 5 years of flawless code, 5 years of consistent gains, gone. And the man responsible was on his 17th call to me, begging, while his trading floor descended into chaos behind him. I let it go to voicemail. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 weeks ago, this same man had fired me over a spreadsheet error I'd caught myself. A transposed digit, 1.47 instead of 1.74, in a reference cell, in a scenario model that wasn't even live. He'd made it a public execution, CC'd half the executive floor, called my precision into question. Now his optimizations to my algorithm were eating through capital like a wildfire through dry brush, and the only person who could stop it was the woman he'd humiliated and escorted out of the building. My phone lit up again, 11:05 a.m. I picked up this time. Sienna, his voice was shaking. Brock Vanderbilt, Executive Vice President, Yale legacy, heir to a financial dynasty, reduced to this trembling mess. I let the silence stretch. In the background, I could hear shouting, phones ringing, someone yelling about margin calls. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Who owns the shorts? The line went dead quiet. Because we both knew what that question meant. Someone had bet against his firm. Someone had known this catastrophe was coming. Someone had positioned themselves to profit from his inevitable failure. And I was about to find out. It went deeper than either of us imagined. Welcome to the Payback Office channel, where corporate arrogance meets the consequences it's been running from. If stories like this, where the underestimated come out on top and the powerful learn what gravity feels like, speak to something in you, there's a subscribe button waiting. We're climbing towards 7,000 subscribers, and having you along for that journey would mean everything. But for now, let me tell you how a spreadsheet error became the match that burned down a billion-dollar empire, and how the Nepo baby who destroyed my career became a pawn in his own uncle's scheme. My name is Sienna Rhodes. On paper, I was a senior quantitative analyst at Ascent Capital, one of Manhattan's most aggressive boutique trading firms. In reality, I was the architect behind Artemis, the algorithmic trading system that had generated over $340 million in portfolio gains across 5 years. Not that anyone outside the C-suite knew that. Brock Vanderbilt made sure of it. I didn't come from money. My father drove trucks for 30 years. My mother cleaned houses to put me through community college before I transferred to Baruch. I understood what it meant to count pennies, to feel invisible in rooms where everyone else had legacy admissions and trust funds. That background didn't make me bitter. It made me precise. It made me see patterns others missed. And it made me humble enough to double-check my work, to respect data, to understand that numbers don't care about your last name or your corner office. Brock Vanderbilt understood none of these things. He was 31 when he became Executive Vice President of Trading Operations at Ascent, not because he'd earned it, not because he'd built anything, but because his uncle, Clayton Vanderbilt, owned 18% of the firm and sat on the board. Brock had the pedigree, Dalton, then Yale, then a 2-year stint at Goldman that ended quietly. The kind of quiet that comes with NDAs and smoothed-over disasters. He joined Ascent on a Wednesday. By Friday, he was telling people like me, people who'd bled for the firm, how to do our jobs. What I didn't know then was that his arrival wasn't random. It was calculated. And I was about to become collateral damage in a scheme that had been planned months before Brock ever walked through our doors. The spreadsheet error happened on a Thursday in October, a routine variance report, the kind I'd generated hundreds of times. Column D, row 347, a transposed digit, 1.47 instead of 1.74. A tiny mistake in a reference cell that threw off a single projection by half a percentage point in a scenario model that wasn't even live. I caught it myself within 20 minutes, issued a correction, sent the revised report to the distribution list with a note flagging the change. Standard procedure. The kind of thing that happens in quantitative finance because we're human and datasets have thousands of cells. Brock saw an opportunity. The email hit my inbox at 4:47 p.m., CC'd to half the executive floor. Subject, unacceptable error, rate in analytics division. Team. This afternoon's variance report contained a significant computational error that, had it gone unnoticed, could have misinformed trading decisions worth millions. This follows a pattern of declining rigor in our analytics vertical. Effective immediately, I'm implementing a 3-tier review process for all quantitative outputs and will be personally auditing the work of senior analysts. Precision is not negotiable. Brock Vanderbilt, EVP, Trading Operations. I read it twice, then I checked the original error again, a transposed digit in a reference scenario, self-caught, self-corrected, within minutes. This wasn't about precision, this was about territory. For 5 years, I'd operated with unusual autonomy at Ascent. The founders, Randall Huxley and Pamela Kowalski, trusted my work. They gave me access to infrastructure most analysts never touched. They let me build Artemis from concept to deployment, let me refine the logic models. Let me optimize the execution algorithms that made the firm competitive against shops 3 times our size. Brock had been at Ascent for 9 weeks. In that time, he tried to insert himself into every process he didn't understand. He demanded explanations for code he couldn't read. He'd second-guessed risk models that had been stress-tested through 3 market corrections. And he'd started asking pointed questions about Artemis, about who controlled it, who got credit for it, whose name was on the documentation. The answer to all 3 was mine. And that, apparently, was the problem. The 3-tier review process lasted 6 days before it collapsed under its own bureaucratic weight. Traders started complaining that analytics were delayed. Deals stalled waiting for reports. Brock quietly killed the policy, but never sent a retraction email. He just shifted tactics. In November, he started attending the weekly quant meetings. Not contributing, just sitting in the corner, arms crossed, watching, taking notes. Asking the occasional question designed to sound insightful, but betraying a fundamental misunderstanding of how quantitative modeling worked. Why don't we just increase the confidence interval to 99%? He asked once, during a discussion about Monte Carlo simulations. I explained, patiently, that higher confidence intervals widened probability bands, which reduced actionable precision. We calibrated intervals based on the decision context, not arbitrary targets. He nodded like he understood. He didn't. In December, he began requesting access to Artemis's core architecture. Not through me, through it. He wanted login credentials, administrative rights, full visibility into the algorithms, logic modes, and execution parameters. Randall Huxley denied the request, politely but firmly. Artemis was proprietary, its architecture was need-to-know. Brock wasn't a quant, he didn't need to know. That's when Brock stopped being passive-aggressive and just became aggressive. January 9th, a Tuesday, I was testing a refinement to Artemis's momentum detection module when Brock appeared in my office doorway. No knock, no preamble. Conference room 3, now. I glanced up from my monitors. I'm in the middle of a... Now, Sienna. Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. This wasn't another grandstanding lecture. This felt different, colder. Conference room 3 was glass-walled, overlooking the trading floor. When I walked in, Brock was already seated at the head of the table. Beside him sat Alexis Drummond, the firm's HR director, looking uncomfortable. Across from them was Kyle Brennan, Ascent's general counsel. No one invited me to sit. Brock slid a manila folder across the table. 2 weeks ago, you ran a custom query on Artemis that deviated from approved trading parameters. The system executed 18 unauthorized positions. Total exposure, $4.2 million. I stared at him. That was a sandbox test, a closed environment, no live capital. It's documented in my testing logs. The logs show live execution codes. Because I was testing execution speed using live market data, the positions were simulated. No actual money moved. This is basic protocol for optimization testing. Brock's expression didn't change. The compliance review disagrees. He opened the folder. Inside was a printout of my testing log, sections highlighted in yellow. Someone had annotated the margins with phrases like unauthorized risk exposure and protocol violation. Someone who didn't understand the difference between a simulation and a live trade. "This is a mischaracterization," I said evenly. "Kyle, you've seen my testing documentation. This is standard procedure." Kyle Brennan shifted in his seat. He didn't look at me. "The concern is whether proper authorization was obtained before engaging live market feeds, even for testing purposes. I've run tests like this for 5 years. It's in my employment agreement. Randall approved the testing framework personally." "Randall is semi-retired," Brock said, "and I'm the one responsible for trading operations now, which means I'm responsible when analysts go rogue." "Rogue?" The word came out sharper than I intended. Alexis Drummond flinched. Brock leaned back, fingers steepled. "Your position is analyst, not visionary. You're here to execute models I approve, not to run experiments with firm capital." "There was no firm capital. It was a sandbox." "Then you won't mind if we implement a new rule requiring executive sign-off for any testing that touches live data feeds." I took a breath, held it, let it out slowly. This wasn't about the test. This was about control, about clipping my wings, about making sure I understood who was in charge now. "Fine," I said. "Put it in writing, I'll comply." Brock smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. "Good, then we're done here." I turned to leave. "Oh, and Sienna." I stopped. "I'm going to need administrative access to Artemis by end of week. Full documentation, logic models, execution parameters, everything." I turned back slowly. "That's proprietary architecture. Randall would need to." "Randall is on a yacht somewhere in the Caribbean. Pamela's dealing with her mother's estate. I'm the acting head of trading, and I'm telling you I need access." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of cold coffee and my laptop, reviewing every piece of documentation related to Artemis. My employment contract. The intellectual property agreement I'd signed when I built the system. The email chain where Randall had explicitly granted me autonomy over the algorithm's development and maintenance. Legally, Artemis belonged to Ascent, but operationally, I was its architect and sole administrator. The code was dense, idiosyncratic, built on 5 years of iterative refinement. It wasn't something you could just hand over to someone who didn't understand quantitative modeling. More importantly, it wasn't something you should hand over to someone like Brock Vanderbilt. Someone who saw a sophisticated trading algorithm as a tool for ego rather than a precision instrument that could destroy capital if mishandled. I sent an email to Randall at 3 a.m., polite but urgent, explaining the situation, asking for guidance. He responded 14 hours later. "Trust your judgment. Brock's learning the ropes. Give him what he needs to feel looped in, but don't compromise system integrity." Vague, diplomatic, useless. I gave Brock documentation, high-level overviews, the kind of materials you'd present to a board, strategic summaries, performance metrics, risk parameters, not the actual code, not the logic modes, not the execution architecture. He returned them 2 days later with a post-it note. "This isn't what I asked for." The next week, he stopped asking. He just took it. January 23rd. I arrived at my desk to find my administrative credentials for Artemis had been revoked. Not suspended. Revoked. I couldn't access the system I'd built. Couldn't review the execution logs. Couldn't monitor the algorithms running live trades with real money. I walked straight to Brock's office. He was on a call, but he waved me in, holding up one finger. "No, tell them we're confident in the model. Yeah, aggressive but calibrated. Right, talk soon." He hung up, smiled at me. "Sienna, what can I do for you?" "You locked me out of Artemis." "Temporarily reassigned access. I'm implementing some optimizations. Should be transparent to you." "Optimizations?" "The system's been running the same core logic for 3 years, diminishing returns. I'm updating the risk parameters to capture more alpha." My blood went cold. "You're changing the risk parameters?" Modestly, well within tolerances. Brock, those parameters are calibrated against 5 years of market data. They're stress-tested. If you adjust them without understanding the downstream impacts. I understand perfectly. You built a conservative system, steady gains but capped upside. I'm unlocking potential. You're introducing catastrophic risk. His smile vanished. I'm doing my job. You're welcome to do yours, which is generating the analytics reports I assign. Or you can keep questioning me and we'll have another conversation with HR. I stood there, hands clenched, doing the math. If I pushed back, I'd get fired. If I stayed quiet, he'd blow up the system. Either way, I lost. I want my objections on record, I said. Noted. Anything else? I turned and walked out. For 2 weeks, I worked blind. I generated reports, attended meetings, smiled politely while Brock talked about his optimizations to our trading system. I watched the firm's daily P&L summaries, looking for signs of instability. On February 6th, I saw the first crack. A single-day loss of $1.8 million. Not catastrophic, but unusual. Artemis didn't have losing days that size, not with the original risk parameters. I pulled what public data I could access. The positions were leveraged higher than the system's design specs. The stop losses were wider. The algorithm was taking bigger bets, holding them longer, riding volatility instead of respecting it. Brock's optimizations. I documented everything. Screenshots, date stamps, performance comparisons against historical norms. On February 10th, another loss, $2.4 million. I requested a meeting with Pamela Kowalski. She was back from dealing with her mother's estate, at least part-time. Her assistant said she was unavailable, booked solid, maybe next week. I tried Randall again. His assistant said he was extending his sabbatical, unreachable. That's when I realized the truth. Brock had isolated me, positioned himself as the trading operations authority, made sure the founders were distant or disengaged. I was alone. February 14th, Valentine's Day, the irony wasn't lost on me. Brock called an all-hands meeting for the analytics division. 23 people crammed into the main conference room. He stood at the front, hands in his pockets, radiating false casualness. Quick update, everyone. We've been running some exciting enhancements to Artemis, and the results are promising. Volatility's been higher than usual industry-wide, so we've had some noise in the short-term numbers, but the model's performing exactly as expected. Lie, the model was performing exactly as I'd warned. Unstable, over-leveraged, bleeding capital. That said, Brock continued, we're tightening up accountability. Some recent analytics work has fallen short of standards. Errors, missed deadlines, sloppy methodology. He wasn't looking at me, but everyone else was. So effective immediately, Sienna Rhodes is being transitioned out of her role as senior quantitative analyst. The room went silent. I felt my face go numb. Sienna's made valuable contributions, Brock said, voice smooth as poison, but it's time for fresh perspectives. Her last day will be February 18th. We wish her the best. He smiled at me, that same empty smile. I didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't give him the satisfaction. I just stood up and walked out. They gave me 4 days. 4 days to transition my responsibilities and clear out my desk. In reality, they wanted me gone immediately, but employment law required a minimum notice period for senior staff without cause termination. I spent those 4 days doing 2 things. First, I copied every piece of documentation I legally could. My personal work logs, performance reviews, emails proving I'd built Artemis, communications warning against the risks Brock was introducing. Second, I made a phone call. Jackson Mercer was a former colleague from my Baruch days. He'd gone into forensic accounting and now worked as an independent consultant, specializing in financial irregularities. We'd kept in touch over the years, mostly holiday cards and occasional coffee. I met him at a cafe in Midtown on my lunch break, February 17th. Let me get this straight, Jackson said, stirring his espresso. This guy fires you, takes over your algorithm, and is actively destabilizing it with changes he doesn't understand. That's the summary. And you think he's going to blow up the firm? I think he's going to blow up capital. Whether that takes down the firm depends on how much rope Ascent's investors give him. Jackson leaned back. What do you want from me? Information. You've got access to trading analytics databases, short interest reports, institutional positioning data. I want to know if anyone's betting against Ascent. His eyebrows went up. You think someone's shorting them? I think if Brock's instability is visible in the performance data, smart money would notice. And if they're positioning for a collapse, then Brock's not just incompetent, he's a mark. Jackson nodded slowly. I'll dig around, quietly. He called me that night. You were right, he said. 3 hedge funds have established short positions against Ascent in the last 2 weeks. Not massive, but deliberate. Someone's expecting a correction. Who? Thornhill Capital, Silver Lake Partners, and a smaller shop called Obsidian Group. I wrote down the names. Any connections to Brock, to the Vanderbilt family? Not that I can see. But Sienna, if you're thinking about playing this somehow, be careful. You don't have inside access anymore. Anything you do could look like retaliation or worse. I'm not playing anything. I just want to know who's orchestrating the collapse. That was true, mostly. My last day at Ascent was February 18th, a Friday. I packed my desk in silence while former colleagues avoided eye contact. A few people stopped by to say quiet goodbyes, most didn't. At 4 p.m., Alexis Drummond from HR collected my badge, my laptop, my access cards. Good luck, Sienna, she said, without meeting my eyes. I walked out of the building into a cold drizzle, carrying a single cardboard box of personal items. I should have felt devastated, angry, lost. Instead, I felt something sharper. Clarity. I went home, made tea, opened my laptop, and I started mapping the collapse. Brock had administrative access to Artemis, but he didn't understand its architecture. The algorithm wasn't a single program, it was a networked system of interdependent modules. Momentum detection, volatility assessment, position sizing, execution timing, stop-loss triggering. Each module had parameters calibrated to work in concert with the others. Change one without adjusting the rest, and you created cascade failures. Brock had changed the position sizing module, allowing larger bets. But he hadn't adjusted the stop-loss triggers, which were calibrated for smaller positions. So when volatility spiked, the system held losing positions far longer than it should, magnifying losses. He'd also widened the momentum detection sensitivity, trying to capture more trading opportunities. But that meant the system was chasing noise instead of signal, entering positions based on statistical artifacts rather than genuine market movements. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The only question was when. I spent the weekend building a predictive model, a shadow version of Artemis, stripped down and running on historical data. I fed it the parameters Brock had implemented, then simulated forward performance under different market scenarios. In calm markets, the system underperformed but survived. In volatile markets, it hemorrhaged capital. And if volatility spiked sharply, the kind of spike that happened during unexpected news events or macro shocks, the system entered a death spiral. Losses triggered margin calls. Margin calls forced liquidations. Liquidations created more volatility. More volatility triggered more losses. Cascading failure. I looked at my calendar. Earnings season was ramping up. The Fed had a policy meeting scheduled for March 2nd. Geopolitical tensions were simmering in 2 different regions. Plenty of catalysts for volatility. I didn't have to do anything, I just had to wait. The call came March 2nd, 11:05 a.m. I was in my apartment, drinking coffee, watching CNBC with the sound off. The Fed had just announced a surprise 75 basis point rate hike, larger than expected, hawkish language, markets immediately volatile. The S&P dropped 2% in the first 30 minutes. Volatility indices spiked. Bond yields whipsawed. Perfect conditions for Artemis to self-destruct. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. Sienna. Brock's voice, strained, trembling. I waited. Sienna, I were having a technical issue with Artemis. The system's executing positions faster than there are margin calls, and I need you to. You need me to what, Brock? Silence, then quieter. Fix it. Fix what exactly? The algorithm, it's losing money, a lot of money. The risk controls aren't working and the positions keep expanding and... The risk controls are working exactly as you configured them. You widened the stop losses. You increased position sizes. You made the system more aggressive. This is what aggressive looks like when volatility spikes. Sienna, please, I'll reinstate you. Full position, raise, whatever you want, just stop the bleeding. I took a sip of coffee, let the silence stretch. Who owns the shorts, Brock? What? The short positions against Ascent, 3 hedge funds, established 2 weeks ago. Who told them to bet against the firm? More silence, then barely audible. I don't know what you're talking about. Someone knew the system was unstable. Someone positioned to profit from the collapse. Was it you, your uncle, someone you bragged to about your optimizations? Sienna, I swear I didn't. It doesn't matter. You built the bomb. Whether you lit the fuse intentionally or through incompetence doesn't change the outcome. Please, tell me how to shut it down. I almost laughed. You have administrative access, you shut it down. I tried. The system won't accept my override codes. It says only the primary architect can execute an emergency halt. Of course it did, because I'd built that failsafe into the system 5 years ago. A final protection against exactly this kind of scenario, someone with access, but without understanding trying to force changes that could destroy everything. The system would only accept an emergency shutdown from me. And I was no longer an employee of Ascent Capital. That's unfortunate, I said. Sienna. Good luck, Brock. I hung up. He called back 17 times in the next hour. I watched each call light up my screen, vibrate twice, then go to voicemail. The voicemails became increasingly desperate. 11:14 a.m. Sienna, we're down 23 million. Please just call me back. 11:31 a.m. 41 million now. The board's calling an emergency meeting. We need your help. 11:52 a.m. Sienna, for God's sake, answer your phone. This isn't just about me. People are going to lose their jobs. Please. I deleted each one without listening all the way through. Instead, I opened my laptop and watched the carnage unfold in real time through publicly available market data. Artemis was executing trades across multiple exchanges, and the patterns were unmistakable if you knew what to look for. The algorithm was chasing momentum signals that didn't exist, doubling down on losing positions, and triggering stop losses so wide they might as well not have existed at all. It was beautiful in a horrifying way. Like watching a controlled demolition, except nothing about this was controlled. At 12:17 p.m., my phone rang again. Different number. I recognized it, Pamela Kowalski's direct line. I answered. Sienna, her voice was raw, she'd been crying. Please don't hang up. I'm listening. Brock told me everything, what he did, how he pushed you out, how he changed the system. She took a shaky breath. I should have been here, I should have protected you, but I'm here now and I'm begging you, please help us stop this. You want me to save the firm that fired me 2 weeks ago. I want you to save the people who didn't fire you. The analysts, the traders, the support staff who have nothing to do with Brock's ego. They're going to lose everything. I felt something twist in my chest. She wasn't wrong. 23 employees at Ascent had no idea their jobs were evaporating because a Nepo baby had decided to play with tools he didn't understand. But those same 23 employees had watched me get fired and said nothing. Where's Brock now? I asked. In the server room with it. They're trying to manually override the system, but every time they shut down one module, Artemis roots around it and keeps trading. Of course it did. I'd built redundancy protocols to prevent accidental shutdowns during critical trading periods. Those same protocols were now preventing anyone from stopping the bleeding. And Randall. On a helicopter from Teterboro, he'll be here in 20 minutes. Tell him he's 20 minutes too late. Sienna. I'll stop the cascade, I said quietly, but not for free and not for Brock. Pamela went silent. I want full documentation that Brock's modifications caused this failure. I want a formal apology and retraction of my termination, and I want you to know that whatever's left of this firm after today, I'm never coming back. Done, all of it, just please. Put me on speaker, patch me into the server room. I heard fumbling, then the hollow echo of speakerphone. Background noise, multiple voices, keyboard clicks, the hum of cooling fans. This is Sienna Rhodes, I said. I'm going to walk you through emergency shutdown protocol. But first, everyone except IT personnel needs to leave the room. That includes you, Brock. Sienna, I just want to say, Brock's voice, thick with desperation. Leave the rooms now. Silence, then footsteps, a door closing. Okay, a voice I recognized, Terrell Washington, senior network admin. It's just it now, 4 of us. Good, Terrell, you're going to access the primary control terminal. But don't touch anything until I tell you exactly what to key in. One wrong command and the system will interpret it as an attack and trigger even more aggressive trading. Understood. For the next 11 minutes, I guided them through the shutdown sequence. It wasn't simple. Artemis had been designed to resist shutdowns during volatile markets, a feature meant to prevent panic-driven decisions from disrupting profitable strategies. Now that same feature required a precise sequence of commands, entered in a specific order, with exact timing intervals. One module at a time. Momentum detection first, to stop new positions from opening, then execution timing to prevent pending orders from triggering, then position sizing, then volatility assessment. The stop-loss module had to stay active until the very end, or the system would be unable to exit existing positions. Okay, Terrell said, his voice tight. That's the last command, executing now. A pause that felt like an hour. System shows, all modules offline, trading halted, positions are holding static. I heard someone exhale shakily in the background. Now liquidate everything, I said. Manual execution, get out of every position at market price. Don't try to minimize losses, just get flat. On it. I stayed on the line while they worked, listening to the clipped communication of traders executing orders, closing positions, watching the damage tally up. Finally, Terrell came back on. We're flat, all positions closed. Final P&L. A different voice answered, someone from accounting. Total loss, $342 million. The exact amount Artemis had generated over 5 years, to the million. 5 years of work, gone, in 3 hours and 14 minutes. I hung up without saying goodbye. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at my laptop screen. The market data feed still scrolling. The world moving on, indifferent to Ascent Capital's self-inflicted disaster. My phone buzzed, a text from Jackson Mercer. Holy shit, you watching this? Ascent just imploded. You okay? I typed back, I'm fine. Can you trace those short positions again? I want exact dates they were established. 3 minutes later, he sent me a document. Trade confirmations, position dates, institutional filings. Obsidian Group, Clayton Vanderbilt's shell company, had established its short position on January 25th. 2 days after Brock had locked me out of Artemis. 2 days after he'd started making his optimizations. Thornhill Capital and Silver Lake Partners had opened their positions January 27th and 28th. Someone had tipped them off. Someone who knew the system was being destabilized and exactly when to bet against it. I opened a new browser window and started searching. Clayton Vanderbilt's professional history, his connections, his other investments. It took 40 minutes to find the link. Thornhill Capital's managing partner, Oliver Whitmore, had been Clayton's roommate at Princeton. They served on 2 nonprofit boards together. Silver Lake's chief investment officer, Meredith Tang, had worked at a private equity firm Clayton had founded in the 90s. This wasn't opportunism, this was coordination. Clayton had placed his incompetent nephew in a position of power, knowing Brock would make catastrophic decisions. Then he'd positioned his friends to profit from the inevitable collapse, taking his own cut through Obsidian Group. Brock wasn't the architect of this disaster. He was the patsy. And I'd been collateral damage in a conspiracy that had been planned before I even knew I was a target. At 3:45 p.m., my apartment buzzer rang. I checked the video intercom. A man in a suit, early 50s, holding a credentials case. "Miss Rhodes, I'm Special Agent Timothy Foster with the SECS Division of Enforcement. I was hoping we could talk." I buzzed him up. Agent Foster sat at my kitchen table, drinking water I offered, his credentials case open between us. His partner, a younger woman named Agent Yolanda Harris, stood near the window taking notes. "We've been monitoring unusual trading activity around Ascent Capital for the past 3 weeks, Foster said. "Short positions established by multiple institutional investors in close temporal proximity, followed by today's catastrophic losses. The pattern suggests possible insider trading or market manipulation." "You think someone knew Ascent was going to collapse," I said. "We think someone made sure it would collapse." I met his eyes. "I was fired 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure how much help I can be." "You built the trading algorithm that failed today." "I built an algorithm that worked perfectly for 5 years. Brock Vanderbilt modified it without understanding the architecture. That's not a design flaw, that's executive incompetence." "We're not suggesting you're responsible for the losses, Miss Rhodes. We're interested in the timeline. Specifically, when Mr. Vanderbilt made his modifications and who knew about them." Agent Harris stepped forward. "We've already subpoenaed Ascent's communications records, but we'd like to hear your account of what happened, everything you witnessed, everything you documented." I looked at them both, made a calculation. "I'll cooperate fully," I said. "But I need immunity from any potential claims that I contributed to today's losses by refusing to help shut down the system when Brock called me." Foster and Harris exchanged glances. "You're saying Ascent contacted you during the collapse?" Foster asked. "Multiple times. I declined to assist until certain conditions were met." "What conditions?" "Formal documentation that executive modifications, not design flaws, caused the failure, and an apology for my wrongful termination." Agent Harris's pen stopped moving. She looked up. "You leveraged a financial catastrophe to extract an apology." I leveraged my specialized knowledge to ensure the historical record was accurate. The apology was secondary. Foster leaned back, studying me. Then slowly he smiled. "Miss Rhodes, I think you and I are going to get along fine. Tell me everything." The investigation took 4 months. I provided documentation, testimony, forensic analysis. Jackson Mercer's research into the short positions, email chains proving I'd warned against Brock's changes, performance data showing the system's destabilization. But the real break came from an unexpected source. In late April, Oliver Whitmore, Thornhill Capital's managing partner, received a grand jury subpoena. Facing potential prison time for insider trading, he made a deal. He confirmed that Clayton Vanderbilt had approached him in mid-January with investment intelligence about Ascent Capital. Clayton had told him the firm's trading algorithm was being recalibrated for aggressive growth by his nephew, and that the modifications would likely cause significant losses during the next major market volatility event. Clayton hadn't just tipped off his friends. He'd marketed the short opportunity like a product launch. And he'd made sure Brock was in position to deliver the disaster. In September, Clayton Vanderbilt was indicted on 12 counts: insider trading, securities fraud, market manipulation, and wire fraud. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Trading records, recorded phone calls, Whitmore's testimony, my documentation proving Clayton had access to information about Artemis's instability through Brock. Clayton's legal team fought hard. They claimed Brock had acted independently. That Clayton's short position was just prudent risk management based on public information about market volatility. But the timeline was damning. The positions were too precise, the coordination too obvious. In November, facing a trial that would destroy him, Clayton accepted a plea agreement. $67 million in fines and disgorgement of profits, a lifetime ban from securities trading. No prison time, but his reputation shattered beyond repair. Brock wasn't charged criminally. Prosecutors determined he'd been manipulated by his uncle rather than a willing participant. But the civil suits buried him. Former investors, employees who'd lost their jobs, his own uncle's legal team, trying to establish that Brock had acted independently. His trust fund evaporated in legal fees and settlements. Last I heard, he was selling luxury cars at a dealership in Greenwich, trading on the Vanderbilt name to close deals with people who hadn't followed the news. But before all that legal machinery ground to its inevitable conclusion, there was one moment I hadn't expected. 3 weeks after the collapse, I received a text from an unknown number. "Can we talk, just you and me? I owe you that much. B." Brock. My first instinct was to delete it, but something made me stop. I texted back, "Columbus Park, tomorrow 2 p.m., come alone." He was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench facing the East River. He looked different, smaller somehow. The confidence that had always radiated from him, inherited, unearned, but real, had evaporated. He wore jeans and a plain jacket, no designer labels visible. His hair needed cutting. He stood when he saw me. "Thank you for coming." I didn't sit. "You have 5 minutes." I know what my uncle did. The SEC showed me the evidence. The phone records between him and Whitmore, the trading patterns. He looked at the ground. I was so stupid. He kept asking me about the system, about the changes I was making. I thought he was finally taking me seriously. Finally proud. "He was setting you up." "I know that now," Brock's voice cracked. "But that doesn't change what I did to you. The spreadsheet error, the way I treated you, firing you, none of that was Uncle Clayton. That was all me." I waited. "I was threatened by you," he continued. "Everyone at Ascent talked about you like you walked on water, the brilliant analyst who built the golden goose, and I was just the nephew who got the job. I wanted to prove I belonged there, that I could improve on what you built. By destroying it. By trying to make it mine." He finally looked at me. His eyes were red. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and that you were right about everything. The risk parameters. The cascade failure, all of it." A fairy horn sounded across the water. "Your uncle made $42 million betting against your incompetence," I said. "He turned you into a weapon and aimed you at everything I built. And you were so eager to prove yourself that you never questioned why he suddenly cared about your work." Brock nodded slowly. "The SEC asked me if I want to testify against him. My own attorney says I shouldn't, that it makes me look vindictive, like I'm trying to shift blame." "Are you going to do it?" He met my eyes. "Yes, because it's the truth, and because it's the only thing I can do that actually means something." I studied him for a long moment, this broken version of the man who'd smiled while firing me. "Your 5 minutes are up," I said. I turned to walk away. "Sienna." I stopped but didn't turn around. "For what it's worth," Brock said quietly, "you're the best quant I've ever seen, and Artemis was brilliant. I should have just stayed out of your way." I walked away without responding. Some apologies don't change anything, but at least he'd finally said something true. Ascent Capital declared bankruptcy in May. The firm was liquidated, assets sold to cover debts, employees scattered to competitor firms. Randall called me one last time, right before the final dissolution. "I'm sorry," he said simply, "for all of it." "I know. What will you do now?" I looked at the documents spread across my desk, articles of incorporation, partnership agreements, angel investor term sheets. "I'm building something new," I said. "A firm where the people who do the work get the credit, where competence matters more than connections, where entitled heirs don't get to destroy what others build." "You'll need capital." I've got investors, people who value substance. Good, he paused. It should have been you running Ascent, not Brock, not even me, you. I know that too. Good luck, Sienna. You too, Randall. Rhodes Analytical launched in October. Small team, lean operations, every employee an equity stakeholder, no executive positions for anyone who couldn't code, model, or trade. Our first-year returns were modest but consistent, 18% gains, 0 down months. By year 2, we'd attracted $120 million in assets under management. By year 3, we were competitive with firms 10 times our size. And by year 5, we'd become the story people told about what happens when you build a firm on merit instead of pedigree. I still think about Brock sometimes. About that phone call at 11:05 a.m. when his world was collapsing and he thought I'd save him. Part of me wonders if I should have. If letting Ascent burn made me as ruthless as the system that had tried to crush me. But then I remember the spreadsheet error, the condescending emails, the way he'd smiled when he fired me. And I remember the question I asked him that morning. Who owns the shorts? He never answered, but the market did. And the market, unlike Brock Vanderbilt, doesn't care about your last name. It only cares about what you've earned. If stories about merit defeating entitlement, about the underestimated building empires from the ashes of someone else's arrogance, resonate with you, consider subscribing. We're on our way to 7,000 subscribers, and this community of people who believe competence should matter more than connections means everything. There's a whole archive of stories where the overlooked come out on top, where hard work outplays inherited privilege, where the Brocks of the world learn that capital doesn't care about your uncle's board seat. Until the next story, remember, algorithms don't lie, markets don't play favorites, and sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone's incompetence run its natural course. This is Payback Office, where consequences catch up and merit gets the final word.